Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Wherever you are in this beautiful world, you need your daily kick of GuitarWank Podcast, and I'm bringing it to you from North Hollywood, California. My name is Troy MacCubbin, and I'm sitting here with the incredible, delightful, delirious Bruce Forman, and the amazing, the funny, the extravagant Scott Henderson. Thank you, gentlemen. With you guys, when you see, I think most guitarists, there's probably like 6 stages you go through when you see another guitarist play. And they're probably like, I'm better than this guy.
That would not be one of my stages.
No, when you first see a guitar player and then you run it through your head and it's like, oh, this guy's really good. Oh, shit, I suck. He's got better tone. Oh, my tone sucks. I should stop. It's probably a...
Now you're getting closer.
You're getting close.
Yeah.
Then you justify why you should still keep going.
Yeah.
Some people like what I do.
My dog likes what I do.
Right. Fuck, I've got gigs on the books. I might as well play them. You know.
I've been going through that this week. A lot. Yeah. Because I find, my iPhone sometimes does weird stuff. It somehow gets itself off shuffle. I don't know how it does that, and I end up listening to a whole album at a time when I'm driving. It's basically the only time I listen to music is when I'm driving.
Right.
I don't have time to listen at home because I'm working on my own shit or doing something with the dogs or whatever. But so I finally got my iPod back on shuffle, and it seems to be really guitar heavy this week.
Right.
It seems to be just popping down on the best guitar tracks ever made by everybody but me. I'm really starting to get a complex, man. It's like, oh wow, everything I'm hearing just makes me sound like shit. It's really pissing me off.
Do you guys seriously, because as more of a student to you guys, we put you guys up there, but do you guys go through that as much as I feel like most guitarists go through that?
Does, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think the level makes any difference.
How can you not?
Right.
Yeah.
How can you not? You can be good or okay or even great, but you can't be that good. There's just so many different ways to cut a pie, and guys are just playing so great and so creative, and it's inspiring and it's beautiful and it's so depressing and humiliating at the same time.
I was just gonna say, don't forget depressing and humiliating.
You want them to sound so great because it's so wonderful, and then you want them to stop and just suck for a while,
You think someone like Django or Wes, they had those moments like, oh, fuck, I suck today.
Do.
I would assume they did, but I think there was a different time where they didn't allow themselves to talk about it or maybe even think about it. Also, they didn't have access to a lot of guys.
Right.
So how did they hear about it? Well, maybe somebody played a record, or they were in town and they went out after the gig and heard another band play and were blown away by somebody. But it wasn't like an iPod and Facebook and YouTube where you basically somebody farts in Indonesia and we can smell it.
Yeah. But another thing
But that's just because the way the wind blows.
Another thing that I would bring up is a lot of great players were junkies. I refuse to believe that was for fun 100% of the time. I think it was just as much to medicate about feeling horrible about themselves.
Okay.
Probably because they thought they sucked.
Yeah.
And a lot of great players, I've heard stories about Michael Brecker come off stage in a horrible depression thinking that he sucked. And that's Michael Brecker.
Yeah.
So come on, give me a break.
Yeah.
If he's entitled to feel he sucks, I certainly am entitled to feel I suck.
But he's Jewish like me. We wrote the book on that shit.
Right. So I think a lot of the famous guys of the past that you knew were junkies, there might have been a reason for that they had to medicate just from just to help
To
them
get
get
through
through, you know, that self-loathing.
Yeah.
You know, which we all have.
Yeah.
You know, when you know, I mean, not all the time, but moments are moments.
It's waves.
Yeah,
of
sure.
shit.
Definitely. It's like a little sickness you have, and it comes back and it goes away. It goes into remission, then it pops up and it gets worse sometimes. And weird things can bring it on,
Yeah.
and you know, weird things get rid of it. It's just being alive.
What do you guys do when you do go through that? What's the kind of the path that you guys deal with when you feel like that?
I like to do crack. That always helps.
That's straight to the point. I like that.
Yeah, I can't top that. Haven't tried it yet, but I'm open to it. You know,
I am kidding, you know.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, you would never know it by knowing me, right? Yeah. You know what it is too is you know, they say, you know, you shouldn't compare yourself to other people. Maybe that's true, but I like to listen to music.
Yeah.
It's like I get inspiration from it, but at the same time I get my ass kicked by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't just live in a bubble. You know. Now I have chosen to not listen to certain people, you know, for long lengths of time because I don't want to be too influenced by them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there was a time back in the early Tribal Tech days where I was sounding a little bit too much like Alan.
Right.
You know, and there have been times where people have accused me of using my whammy bar too much in the way of Jeff Beck, you know, or Richie Blackmore. So there was a time when I just didn't listen to those guys anymore and just tried to get as far away from them as I could and listen to something completely different, anything.
Right. Is that a weird ego thing for you? Like, on one side of it's like, oh, cool, they're comparing to me to those kind of players.
I
and
never
on the other
thought
side,
it was cool.
You never thought it was cool?
No,
Me
in
neither.
fact, when
Okay.
if someone uses another guitar player's name in one of my reviews, I just got really pissed off. No, I love this guy. He's one of my dearest friends. His name is
You know, something bad's going to be said.
Bill Meredith. He's a great friend of mine, you know,
Right.
in Florida, and he writes for Jazz Is, and he just voted Vibe Station as one of the best albums of 2015, and I love that, and thank you, Bill. It was great.
Yeah.
But he also mentioned other guitar players' names, you know, and I went, why can't I just be me? You know, why do I have to be compared to this guy or that guy, or influenced by this guy or that guy? You know, it bugs me. And all the time that I was in Tribal Tech, people bringing up Weather Report, every critic that listened to one of our records and reviewed it would say, yeah, these guys rock, it's a great band, this album is 5-star album, they sound just like Weather Report, get their album. And I would just cringe. And I go, well, you know, that serves me right for hiring a keyboard player that's a Zonal clone. You know, that's my fault, right, as a band leader.
Right.
You know, we already had fretless bass in the band, although Willis sounds a hell of a lot less like Jocko than Kinsey sounds like Zonal. I mean, Kinsey is Zonal. He's the second coming of Zonal. So to have that going on in your band, it's no wonder people are comparing you to another band, but still it irks you. You know, you just go, God damn it. You know, why do they have to mention another band every time they review our record? It really
Seems like a template that journalists use, I think, in part, in their defense, to help the people who listen, who read it, to get an idea of the general genre that the people will be hearing. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a lazy thing. They'll go, well, okay, if you like this guy, then try this guy. And I mean, it enables them to explain something in less technical terms that people will understand.
So I shouldn't take it so hard.
You shouldn't, but at the same time, it's hard not to, because interviews. How many times do people ask me what I think of some guitar player who's way more well known than me? Mm-hmm. And it makes me mad because, wow, do they ask those guys what they think of me? No. So you know, I mean, it's like, well, great. I get to, in my little chance to have a little interview my little, postage stamp interview in this big ass magazine, and I got to spend half the time talking about guys that they're covering on the other 500 pages. So, thanks a lot.
So seriously, what do you think of Jay Bonamassa?
But seriously,
can we cut to the chase, Bruce?
Right, they do.
Well,
they
I
really
think he's
do.
got a very prolific Facebook presence.
They do tend to do that, though. They really, and especially in reviews, they have to compare you. Like, I remember one time I got compared to Steve Vai.
What?
I do not sound the slightest bit like Steve Vai, but as soon as I played a wah-wah solo, I was Steve Vai. And the guy said, this Steve Vai wah-wah solo that I played, and I was like, okay, yeah, there's one of my major influences, Steve Vai, right? I was thinking about him when I played that wah-wah solo, right? Not Jimi Hendrix.
Right, you would think. Wow.
But I just can't believe some of these guys, what they say or what they write. But you got a valid point that I never really thought of it in that way. They are trying to steer the listener to something that they've heard before so that they can...
Yeah, because if he starts talking technically sense. And he says his use of legato sounds and this and that and the high gain structure and blah, 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 and people are just kind of going... but he says, oh yeah, think of Jeff Beck or Jimmy Page or Wes Montgomery or Charlie Christian. Immediately people go, oh, I know that. In their mind they hear a sound that they can wrap their head around that enables them to understand what's being said. Doesn't make us feel any better because, of course, we're influenced by all those people. How could you not be? We don't live in a bubble. Right. But at the same time, what really makes our music different is our imagination and our sound and our approach and our architecture of how we've constructed all this music and these sounds. And to sit and just... it's like Kenny Burrell. It's like, oh, thanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
God, I could have just gotten Kenny. It would have saved me a whole lot of time practicing.
Yeah. It's part of the very nature of creating music is trying to create something that no one has created before. That's the whole thing. To just somehow squeeze some originality out of yourself. That's almost, I would have to say, that's my main goal. I almost would rather be shitty and original than good and sound just like someone else. Right. So
that's what I've been trying to do for a long time.
I've succeeded in it.
Yeah, well, I've succeeded in the shitty part. The original part, I'm still holding down.
But I really, that's why it irks me so much when people say, they compare me to something, especially when it's not true. If they had the ears and really heard some of the nuances and could compare it and really be accurate, maybe I wouldn't be so offended. They might say, well, this little section on this song reminds me of this. This could have been Gentle Giant influenced. And I might go, you know what, he's right. There's a Tribal Tech song I wrote on Tribal Tech X. I can't remember the name of it, but it's definitely influenced by Sly Stone in Time. It has that same kind of groove. It's got that same kind of syncopation. And I was definitely influenced by that tune when I wrote it. And if anyone hears that, God bless them, because they've got good ears.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't mind if someone said, yeah, that song was influenced by In Time, because it really was. In fact, when Dennis Chambers first heard it, when I played it for him, he said, I know what you've been listening to. He knew.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he knows that song. It's the funkiest song in the universe, in the known universe, right? So when Dennis heard that song, he said, oh, In Time. He said, I know you were influenced by that. But that was one tune on one record, and Tribal Tech had 10 records. So I don't mind that little bit of
You let that slide.
I can let that slide, right. But when they say your whole existence is due because you...
But isn't that it's the number one question? If you introduce someone to a musician or a band, they go, well, what do they sound like? And then people just use references.
They do.
So,
and that's what happens when you hire people that sound exactly like someone else.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I'm not the first one to say that Kinsey sounds like Joe. He does. He is Joe.
Yeah.
So when people hear it, they're going to go, whoa, well, there's Zawinul right there.
And there's also, it's really hard to sound just like somebody.
He did it, though.
Yeah, okay, well, that's good. I sure enjoyed listening to you guys and listening to him.
I just wanted to remind you that you are listening to GuitarWank Podcast. And if you aren't enjoying it as much as I am, then you're not enjoying it. So
I have to be here.
I just
There are times where, I have a song out called Blues for Wes. Well, what do you think it's going to sound like? Of course, I'm going to play with my thumb, and I'm going to play octaves, and it's my little tribute to Wes. But I don't sound like Wes. If you'd hear, it's kind of like, imagine me dusting off an old family photo and looking at it. And all the feelings you have from looking at that old picture, how important that family is to you and how it's such a big part of who you are, and what you've become. So, like he's talking about, doing tribute-ish kinds of things, that's a beautiful thing that all musicians should be encouraged to do, because in doing that, you actually exert a lot of originality and individuality. Unless you're trying to recreate something like those guys did with that kind of blue record. I didn't play an exact solo of Wes. I evoked his memory and created something. Now, usually I don't do that. Usually I'm totally free to start from. But even when I do that, I'm still bringing parts of all the things I've loved and listened to in my life, and things that have happened to me and people who've influenced me, both from recordings and equally importantly from live people that I've played with, many who no one knows who they are.
Yeah.
And that's just what we do as musicians. I keep trying to impress upon my students. It's like playing the instrument is one thing, but really your truest responsibility is engaging your imagination and saying what you have to say. You've been given all these tools through learning to play the instrument and what's been played before you to conceive of something in your imagination that belongs in this moment in time. And that's your responsibility as a musician, really.
It's fucking deep.
Well, Bruce says, I don't sound like Wes. You don't sound like Wes, but you do have Wes-isms in your playing. And that's a beautiful thing, because you've got Wes-isms and you've got lots of other isms in there too.
Man.
So the thing is the combination of what you listen to. You are what you listen to. So, you've got, if you listen to a lot of different players, and that all sort of stirs together in that soup that makes you who you are, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. You can't live in a bubble and just come up with something, or very few people do, live in a bubble and come up with a completely new concept of how to do anything. You're usually influenced by a great number of people. What is that statement? If you steal from one person, it's plagiarism, but if you steal from everybody, it's research. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you just, I had to get away from certain guys because I was listening to them too much. And I'm glad I did. Because now I think I kind of sound like me. But you can still hear definitely some influences, but they're all over the place. There's Richie Blackmore, there's Jeff Beck, there's Schofield, there's Wes. Even though I don't have that sound, I listen to a lot of Wes Montgomery.
Yeah.
Even some of the younger guys who, Kurt Rosenwinkel is younger than me, but I've listened to transcribed a lot from Kurt. He's taught me some great stuff.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful player. And Bruce too, where I've transcribed some of Bruce's stuff and learned some nice lines and stuff, and some finger movements that I never would have thought of myself.
Right.
So I'm a transcriber. I love transcription. I love to dig into people's playing and learn how they do it. But I'm very careful not to get into any one guy too much. Just sort of pick and choose little tiny things from lots of different players to help build my vocabulary, and still try to sound like me.
Right.
Put my little tweak on everything that I learn.
And I guess that's where, from that point, tone comes into it, because tone is such a fingerprint to a lot of players, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Sound is ultimately the most important thing because it's your voice.
Yeah.
If your sound doesn't project what you're trying to say, then you're on a completely false pretext. It's just like you've ruined the whole thing.
I would say that having an amazing tone that people love and being a pretty shitty player, and then someone being an amazing player with really shitty tone, I'd rather have the great tone, right?
I kind of would too. It's hard to listen to stuff that hurts your ears.
Yeah.
But there are guys who have really horrible tone.
What's that?
And that's their signature thing, and yet somehow you find yourself attracted to the whole thing, like an ugly beauty.
Like,
I'm not going to name names.
I'll name names. Mahavishnu Orchestra when they first started. You know, McLaughlin was playing through not the greatest guitar and playing through a Marshall. You know, and at that time in his career, he didn't have a lot of finesse on the guitar like he does now. You know, he was a really young guy in a crazy ass fusion band. It was really good, great writing, you know, and he had a tone that really wasn't that great, but it became such a signature part of that band's sound that it couldn't be any other way. It meshed perfectly with Jerry Goodman's violin sound and Jan Hammer's Moog sound, and it was just part of. You just couldn't change it. It's the Bible of fusion. You know what I mean? It's one of the very first fusion bands that came to my attention, and of course now it's one of the most renowned fusion bands of all time. But certainly not. You wouldn't single out the guitar and go, "Oh, what great tone."
right.
Whereas if you bought one of his albums today, like his new album, Black Light, and you listen to it and you go, "Whoa, that's a really nice guitar tone." So he's grown over the years a lot in every way. Back then, he really wasn't even a jazz player. He's more of a rock player back then when Mahavishnu came. He was playing pentatonic. Now he can play through changes as good as anybody. He's a great jazz player, but you know, he's one of those guys I really respect because he's grown throughout his career and continues to grow.
Yeah.
And he didn't stay in one place like a lot of guys do.
Yeah.
I'd say the same thing for Jeff Beck, who always had, that's different, because he always had great tone. From record one, he always had great tone.
Right, but you know, even singers, horn players. I mean, I remember Wayne Shorter's tone when I first heard it. Pardon me. I was going, boy, that's some weird saxophone tone. You know, I mean, it's kind of nasal and kind of shallow at first and choppy, you know, and all that. And yet, the more I listened to it, the more I loved it. And his sound, of course, changed throughout his career as well. But even so, it was not just this big round sound that you become used to. It had a different sort of edge and cut to it. Mm-hmm. And yet it was beautiful. And I don't know whether it's because I've come to love the whole package and now I think it's beautiful, or if in fact it really is. Who cares? I mean, but we need to honor all these elements and be aware of our sound and how it blends with everything, how it stands out around everything, because this is our voice.
Yeah.
And unlike most of us in our speaking voices, we don't have a whole lot of control over that. We can alter it, obviously, to some degree, and singers can work on their sound and change it. But in general, there's a lot to happening with with guitarists, because it's not just our hands and our ears, but it's also our instrument and our strings and our pick if we use one, and our amp and the kind of speaker that's in the amp and the room we're in. You know, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we need to make peace with them. And frankly, I'm a guy who goes through as if it's like a recurring illness. I go through a tone crisis. I do. I mean, it's sometimes I'll like break through and I'm cool and my sound is what I want it to be and I'm feeling good about it. And then I'll hit this wall and it's like nothing sounds good to me and I'm ready to change everything in it. And it's somehow I kind of work my way through it. I don't know what does it. I play a lot of different instruments. Fortunately, I'm kind of a cowboy, so I do have my axe, but at the same time, I'll sit in on anybody's axe anytime.
Right.
And I go around to the schools for the Monterey Jazz Festival, so I'm playing these kids, like literally junior high school's guitars and school guitars that have been in the school for 20 years. You know what? And amps, the knobs broken off, and so I play a lot of different instruments. I've got a thing where I'm going on the road and I'm just doing a master class and a little concert and that's it. And I just really don't feel like carrying my guitar through the airport, try and get it on the plane, deal with all that stuff for just one hit. And the guy who's putting it on has a bunch of great guitars. So I'm just going to go and play one of them. And I'm cool with that. So, but it does sort of make me a little schizophrenic, I think. I go, wow, why does this sound better than everything I have? And then, but I know if I had it for a week, I'd hate it. Like, it's just a thing that we have. If we're going to go down this road to this ridiculous degree of caring, we're going to hit the wall with these ridiculous situations. I mean, if I were to sit and like, I feel like I need to go see a shrink about it. And anybody else I know, any musician I know, my wife would just laugh and go, just lighten up. I can't even hear the difference when you play all those different guitars. You sound like you. It's just like, what's your problem?
Well, it is an intimate thing that you probably only you notice. I don't even know if I would notice, I'd have to hear you play every day and then hear you switch that little subtle thing that you do and then see if I could hear it. But everybody says the same thing to me, like, oh, I switched this. Doesn't it sound a lot better? They go, what? What are you talking about? So, but you know what? It's really hard. Even if you're trying to copy someone else's tone, it's almost impossible to do. Because unless you play and pick exactly like they do, or play with your fingers exactly the way they do and use exactly the same gear, you're just not gonna, you might get close, but you're not gonna nail it. I have this funny hobby that I have a digital performer file called Tone Copy.
Whoa.
And it's a hobby of mine.
Right.
I've never used it in my career, but it's a hobby. When I have something it's just something that's fun for me to do. I enjoy it. If I have some time off and I just feel like doing something fun, I get one of my favorite guitar players and I try to copy their tone.
Have you got a list?
Yeah, lots of guys.
Give me some.
Stevie Ray, Jeff Beck, Richie Blackmore, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix. Could be anybody that plays a Strat.
Now, when you do this, are you playing their stuff, or are you doing original?
No. I grab their track, I put it into Digital Performer, and then I get another track that I'm on, and I try to adjust my picking and my mic placement and my amp settings and get the right pedal to try to get as close to that tone as possible, just to see if I can do it, just for fun.
That's good for you.
It's good ear training, especially if you're working on frequencies, dialing in frequencies. I listen to it back. And then I see how close I can come just for fun. And then I kind of I discover how those guys got their tone, where the mic was, what type of pedal was being used, where the amp settings were approximately as close as I can get. It's just a little fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think it helps me to hear sounds, to EQ. It helps me in my EQing. But I just it's just nothing more than a hobby. I wouldn't say, okay, now I know how to get the tone he got and use it on one of my records because it's not my tone.
Right.
But it's still fun.
It's fun, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that's why I bought those Jam It tracks, because they had a couple Deep Purple things where you could solo Richie Blackmore's guitar without the band. Boy, did I learn a lot from that. That was fun.
That's cool.
I actually heard him play some of these solos, and you just get rid of the bass and drums and keyboards, and there's the guitar all by itself. and I was surprised how weird it sounds. You know, like very scooped, lack of mid-range, and I was able to dial my amp to sound like that. And I go, well, I wouldn't use that tone in a million years in what I do, but it sure works with what they were doing.
Right.
So it's just something fun to do.
I heard tracks of one of Hendrix. I think it was all along the Watchtower, and it was in a Pro Tools session, and they had all the tracks broken down. And I was so surprised how not distorted his tone was.
Yeah, it's.
I was like, I thought it was way distorted.
Yeah,
it
it's
was
a lot
really
more
clean.
Just sustainy,
Yeah.
but not that. Richie Blackmore too.
Yeah.
He pretty much played through a non-master volume amp, just cranked it up,
Yep.
and used a little tape recorder to boost the sound. And yeah, it's not really very distorted, but it's amazing how sustainy it is without having a lot of gain.
Yeah.
We just wanted to take this little time out to remind you that we love you because you're listening to Guitar Podcasts. No, you're listening to Guitar Wank. That are podcasts that can be found on guitarwank.com.
Bruce, give me 3 or 4 the tones your whole life have just been floored with, or you love, guys.
Well, Wes Montgomery is one.
Yeah.
I love Kenny Burrell's sound, particularly in his early years. Just beautiful.
Yeah.
Those are 2 that just come to mind. I like Grant Green, that short and sharp kind of punchy sound he had too, even though my tone isn't at all like that. I really like that about him. I love, from new guys, I love Peter Bernstein's sound. He really gets a beautiful sound out of his instrument. And, I do this with my students. We do this all together, where I call it sonic analysis, where I make them as like a little homework assignment. They got to pick half a dozen guys, or a girl, whatever, players, and write down the basic qualities of their sound, the basic qualities of their playing, and kind of aesthetically, like, do they play, is it a dark sound? Is it a light sound? Is it a punchy sound? Is it a sweet, is it a very soft sound? Is it a, is it a sustainy sound? Is it not, all these elements of sound, just to really sit and analyze what's there. And then also, how do they play? do they basically play with the rhythm section, or do they kind of play by themselves and have the rhythm section just kind of play along as if they're playing the tracks? Are they interactive or not? Do they basically kind of stay within the harmony, or are they always introducing new harmonic stuff? Do they basically rhythmically stay inside the groove, or do they play against the groove? Just, I'm asking them to listen to the music with that sort of analytical thing. And then I'm asking their aesthetic opinion of these things, and I'm doing it as a teacher. I'm really just sort of, it's a very like I'm being sneaky, a sneaky way of getting them to think about their own playing from that point of view. Because I know if they hear this guy and they say, this guy's a really dark sound. Do you like that sound? Well, if you do, maybe you should darken your sound. This guy plays really punchy. Do you like that? Well, if you should, maybe you should get your setup working so that you get more projection out of your tone. Do you like the guys that interact with the band, or do you like the guys that just sort of seem to riff over the top of everything? These questions answered by a young person can push you in a direction of where you want to go without me introducing my aesthetic into it, because that's the danger of a teacher, is we walk in with our own opinions. And the worst thing we could do is shove our opinions onto them. We need to coax their opinions out of themselves. So
I always just force my opinions on them.
And Scott's way more successful than me, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen.
No, you're absolutely right.
Scott
man.
is the Donald Trump of
guitar
right,
teachers. Exactly. I'm the Republican teacher, man.
That
My
might be
way or the highway. You know what? But you're right, though. But you know what? And subconsciously, you're doing that for yourself as well, because you hear that, and maybe there must be times where you forget about that stuff yourself, because I know I do. And then when I listen to guys, I start hearing those subtleties again that I sometimes forget that are there.
Yeah.
And then you go, it's like every time I teach, I learn something, just because it forces me to put myself in that spot again, listen to something a little more closely than I did before.
Right.
And
Oh, that's
really makes you hear the nuances between different players.
exactly.
How do you guys deal with, because you guys have taught a lot throughout your careers, so how do you deal with it? Because I know when I used to teach, just the fact that sometimes students come in, they haven't practiced, and they drain the enthusiasm out of you sometimes. And, how do you spend a day of teaching and then go work on your own guitar?
Do we have to talk about our students? Because I just want to kill them half the time.
Are they listening to the show? I hope they listen.
Well, I can do students. I got this one covered. You just got to trust me on that.
Good.
You have to guard yourself.
Yeah.
You can't let them suck you down into their own problems. And yet at the same time, I at the college age, I don't feel that it's my responsibility to cheerlead for jazz, get some pom-poms and go, J, A, Z, Z,
We all would love to see that.
Like a football game or something.
See that
I'd love to see
But,
that.
so it's
one of those Dallas Cowboys
they're the
cheerleader
ones-
outfits, man.
they're the ones that come to me for help, guidance. Yeah, well, thanks, man. I
Always here to help, dude.
Yeah, man. Now I know what to do for Halloween.
Why wait?
Yeah, really. Okay, I'm wearing the boots right now, so we get them there. But really, to be honest with you, this music's about playing.
Yeah.
So I just play.
Yeah.
We play, and that's the best thing I can do for them is play with them. So I play with them, and I just play at the highest level, make the best music in the moment with them that I can. And, sometimes it's better than, but I'm demanding of myself the same thing I'm demanding when I'm on a gig. So after 8 hours, I'm sure I'm beaten up. It's like playing an 8-hour gig, but it's not as if I'm allowing them to pull me into some drudgery. I got to guard, my energy and my integrity against that.
Yeah.
And if they come in and they're really a drag and they don't want to play and they don't want to be there, then I ask them to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't tolerate that, because they're not only shitting on themselves and me, they're shitting on the music that I love. and they're shitting on the memory of all the people who've come before them who've played it so beautifully that have, you're starting to get into my family and stuff here, and so I won't tolerate it, and obviously certain things like corporal punishment, murder,
anything physical to them. Like I like to set mine on fire.
Well,
you just get some gasoline and throw it on them and set them on fire, and then toss them out the window of the second story of my building. It's awesome, man.
Are you still in the same room?
Yeah, I'm in that same room you were in that long ago.
Yeah. Wow.
No, you know what? I have to say I have two criteria.
Yeah.
But before I forget this, we were talking about tone for a second.
yeah.
Kurt Rosenwinkel, when he first started, his tone was really terrible. Bad, digital, just really thin. And man, what a difference his tone is now. He's got the most beautiful, fat, tubey, earthy, just gorgeous tone. Happening over like the course of about 6 records. That's a guy who really nailed the tone thing, but he didn't have it at first. Neither did I. But
I didn't even give a shit about it. I was too worried about just notes and rhythm.
I made so many bad decisions early in my career about tone. Now, after doing a couple records or a bunch of records on this crappy 80s digital bullshit, rat gear and crap, now I'm back to playing the same rig I was playing when I was 18. A Marshall and a Strat and a pedal.
That's kind of where I am too.
Yeah, just back to playing the same gear.
You figure you buy good shit and just play it, and the tone should happen, but it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know why not.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
Guitar Center has built an entire empire on that concept alone, and yet, why would it work for me?
That's like Homer's barbecue grill. When he's looking at the grill that he made, he holds up the box.
Yeah, right.
Why doesn't mine look like this? But to get back to the teaching, I have 2 criteria.
Okay.
That's it. And it's as simple as this. If they don't walk in with a tape recorder to tape the lesson, then they're a fucking idiot.
Right.
Right? Then I just say, why aren't you taping? Do you realize that I might play some stuff that might be useful to you? That's like telling me I don't give a fuck what you play. They get kicked out of the room if they don't do that. Second, if sometime during the lesson they don't ask me this question, what should I be working on to sound better? If they don't ask that question, they're a fucking idiot. Right? So those are my 2 criterias. If they don't do those 2 things, they're not worthy of being a student.
I can't remember if I asked that question, Scott.
I don't know. You probably didn't.
And he hasn't heard you play yet, so he's not basing that on what you sound like.
But those are the 2 things. When a student asks me, what should I do? What should I be working on? What are my faults? You just played with me. What are my faults? Then I go on. Here's a guy that knows, he's playing with a more experienced player, and he's asking me, how can I improve myself? And I'm happy to tell him in a nice way too. People get the reputation of some guys won't come and play with me that maybe they've heard some stories of me saying something, but they're not true. I'm the nicest guy in the world when I teach. And I will tell them, man, you really need to work on your time a little bit. You're rushing and you're floating around the time, not in a good way. It's sounding like you're just not able to play in the pocket. So let's work on that. Or stuff like that. Whatever. You're not phrasing, you're not playing melodically. You're scattering all over the place. You're changing your ideas too fast.
I gotta find that tape. I must have a tape of us playing together.
I'm sure, yeah. I have it. It's in my house.
That's on your wall.
He listens to it every day.
You got it framed.
But so that's all I want to say about teaching, because unfortunately the majority of the students don't do that.
Yeah.
So I have to yell at them. Maybe that's where I get that bad reputation.
Well, that and the setting them on fire and throwing them out the window.
that never goes down well.
help.
How many students do you lose a month? I mean, that's a lot.
Well, the MI, they get a lot coming through the door.
Yeah.
The hardest
different
part
where
is
I
finding
teach.
where to bury them. That's the problem. That's the problem.
It's different where I teach. We got to keep them alive a little longer.
Stupid kids, get out of my fucking yard.
This week's installment, who we got, Bruce? Who we're going to add to the Guitar Wankopedia?
I would suggest Larry Kuntz. I think Larry Kuntz.
How do you say his last name?
Kuntz.
Kuntz.
Kuntz. K-O-O-N-S-E.
It's not Kuntz.
Can't we get your mind out of the gutter for 1 second?
Larry's amazing. He's a truly gifted player. He's got just a very unique style. He plays really rhythmically, does a lot of contrapuntal things, two-voice things. He studied as a kid with Jimmy Weibel, who's just one of my mentors as well, and also Joe DiOrio. So he's got this real modern harmonic way of playing, and yet he's just got the greatest time, and he's so sensitive, and he plays great classical guitar too. You can hear a lot of that influence as well. And he's just a really fine musician, somebody everybody should hear if they haven't already.
Okay. Larry.
And his father, Dave Kuntz, I mean, these are the kind of people I really held. Just the kind of like Anthony Wilson from one of the weeks before, is these guys are royalty. I mean, Dave Kuntz, his father is a great guitar player who played with George Shearing in lots of bands. Wow. So, I mean, Larry grew up and the guitar was just in his hands, and it's just so easy for him, just like Anthony, being around the music. It's just like it pisses me off. We have to compete with guys like that. They should have their own union and their own booking agents, and they should leave us the fuck alone.
Well, the Kuntzes. That's how you would call them, right? The Kuntzes.
The Kuntzes.
The flying Kuntzes.
The flying Kuntzes.
I like the Kuntzes already, and I haven't even met them.
Well, they're really nice, and they speak very highly of you.
I like them. All right, that was a great episode. I learned a lot today, and which doesn't take much. But thank you guys, really appreciate it, Scott.
I learned nothing.
Bruce.
In all my years in the music business, I've learned one thing. Unfortunately, that's not enough.
Until next week. Thank you.